I've been telling you for years that your country is taking away more of your rights and privileges and expecting more of you as a citizen. The pact of citizenship has changed from something that you get to have as a benefit to something that you have to do. And I'm going to lay out that case today, but I'm going to also tell you why small countries may be the best place for you to get a second citizenship and share with you a reason why that you've probably never thought of. And so before we talk about why I think Caribbean citizenship and other small countries' citizenship by investment programs are worth considering as a second or even third passport, here's the case in countries like the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, many European Union countries. It used to be in my lifetime, and certainly my parents' lifetime, you were a citizen, you got benefits, they took care of you. You went to the embassy overseas somewhere, oh, they welcomed you with open arms. You got stuck somewhere, they helped you. That's changed. Look at the pandemic. A lot of countries left their citizens to rot. The whole thing of being an American and the helicopters are going to come save you had already fallen apart, but I think it became much wider knowledge that that was no longer the case. Meanwhile, more countries want to reinstate the draft and conscription to send your kids to war. They want to demand that you do more and more things just to renew your passport. They track you more and more, they surveil you more and more. And so from my perspective, you want to have a backup plan. At a minimum, a plan B. You keep a second passport in your back pocket. You wait for anything that goes crazy where you live. You can always get out. For some of us, like myself, it's a plan A. You don't want to be a citizen of that country that's making your life difficult, taxing you all over the world, following you, doing things you don't agree with. But I think what a lot of folks from those big countries push back on is, hey, I've got a good passport for travel. My country is wealthy enough. Why do I want to go, for example, to a Caribbean citizenship by investment country? St. Lucia, where I got mine, Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica. Why do I want to go to one of these tiny fly-spec countries and get a passport? I'm going to share an article with you. It's from the Washington Post. We're not going to talk about the actual topic of the article, but in this article, I found a reason why I think these passports, if you're from a big country that is imposing and has the potential to impose on you, why this kind of passport is so valuable. This Caribbean nation, the headline says, is preparing for the ravages of climate change by selling citizenship. They're talking about Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. They have a fast-track citizenship program for investors, but Dominica has a classic citizenship by investment. They have for about 30 years. You make a donation, you get a passport. Takes a little bit longer these days. Could take about up to a year because of some of the new requirements they've added to follow things imposed on them by the US and the EU. But Dominica is using revenue from its citizenship by investment program to fund its ambitious plans to become more resilient against hurricanes in the Caribbean. We've seen some hurricanes earlier this year in the US and elsewhere. It's been absolutely destructive. And you might think, hey, how does a small country protect itself? Well, let me tell you. From the capital of Dominica, after a Category 5 hurricane barreled through several years ago, dumping almost 2 feet of water, or about 60 centimeters, shearing the roofs from homes, this Caribbean nation vowed to rebuild. And you can imagine, small island, fewer than about 100,000 people, hurricane comes through. Hey, people were telling us, why would I be a citizen? That place is screwed. To fund that expensive mission, it has leaned on an unconventional gusher of cash, selling passports. Now, you're making a donation, you're getting a passport. Rather than living in that country or learning the language, which in their case is English, or doing any of the things that you would normally do to naturalize in another country, rather than relying on your family tree through citizenship by descent, which we help people get also, they're just saying, we're a small country, every dollar counts, we have things we need to do to protect our country. You give us, it was $100,000, now it's double that, and that is what the Washington Post says is their unconventional gusher of cash. And no doubt, citizenship by investment in places like Dominica and Vanuatu makes up a substantial part of their budget. But it has been something that they've done for 30 years. As more people have the money and have the means and have the desire for citizenship by investment, more people are doing it. It's become a bigger part of their country. And now, the article says, Dominica aims to become the world's most climate-resilient island nation without taking on dangerous levels of debt or waiting for the money that wealthy nations have so far failed to deliver. Instead, it's turned to wealthy individuals, often in China or in the Middle East, and yes, A lot more Americans, since Nomad Capitalist has been around over the last 12 years, a lot more Westerners have realized they need a second passport. They're going to places. Just met a friend of mine, former client. He got Dominica. He smiles every time he opens that second passport. He knows now he has options. But Westerners are still the minority. These programs are not designed for, please bring your American money. They're designed for a wide audience of folks who want second passports for a number of reasons. So instead, Dominica turned to wealthy individuals who will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars the privilege of obtaining their citizenship, and for those folks who don't have as good of passports, in turn more easily travel in the West because of the visa-free travel privileges of a Dominica passport. The program goes back to the 90s, but the program, mushrooming in size just before Hurricane Maria struck, has since outgrown the entire domestic tax base, becoming the primary source of national revenue. With citizenship money, Dominica has funded everything from new medical clinics to rent-free residential complexes for people whose homes were destroyed by the hurricane. A former foreign minister who helped lead the resiliency work calls the citizenship money a savior, says the program means a lot to us. And they go on to talk about how the storm flattened the economy. The damage was estimated at more than twice the country's GDP. And they vowed at the UN that year, right after that hurricane, they would make themselves better. And you can read the article in the Washington Post. It went on to talk about how they built low-income housing. They rebuilt housing for their people. Again, very small population. They're building up resilience against when the next hurricane comes. How do they make sure they're going to be in better shape? Things like sloped roads, higher bridges, sturdier homes. They are investing in all of that. They built 2,000 homes with citizenship money in about half a dozen spots around the island that are more resilient. And they showed some of the homes, and they say, hey, look at the homes down the hill. Those homes will fall over the next time something comes through. But we're in the progress of building these thousands of homes that are much more sturdy. And they talked to some of the folks who have these homes built by citizenship money, who said they were grateful. Now, of course, the Western countries, they don't like you having options, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But what's interesting is they talked to some folks about citizenship by investment, the typical professorial types, who said these countries don't have a lot of options. And that's true. Countries in the Caribbean used to use offshore banking. Now offshore banking is more difficult. We've said onshore is the new offshore. You want to be in more substantial jurisdictions. Tiny little islands. Dominica does have an offshore banking sector. The banking sector is not as developed as other places. So to build homes for their people, to be sturdy against hurricanes, to be resilient against stuff that often is outside their control, they resorted to offering citizenship to investors who pass background checks. Now, you can say whatever you want about that, but here's why I think you should consider a passport like this, whether it's Dominica or any of the other small countries. Let's just go through this. First of all, they were waiting around on money pledged by other countries and other institutions. Now, you can say, hey, I don't want my tax dollars to go to support these countries. That's fine. But it shows, one thing Nigel Farage told me in an interview a couple of years ago, these countries should be with us because we share values. And I don't know that I entirely agree with him. I think what we've seen is a lot of pandering and posturing from legacy brand countries that, hey, we're the savior of the world. And then when it comes to delivering on their promises, this is one of many, they don't deliver. And so when you wonder why BRICS is formed, well, it's because a lot of countries think, hey, the Western world said they would do this. They don't actually follow those values. And when you look at why Dominica might resort to offering citizenship by investment, it's we have to take matters into our own hands. And they're doing that. But look at what happened. More than the tax base, they get money from offering a good that people want. And so that's the mindset that you have in a small country. Now, whether they have to have that, as one of the professors says, or not, is irrelevant. They are a very small country in a region of small countries. They have a very small population. They have a certain topography that makes it harder to do things like extract resources. There aren't really many resources to begin with. And so what do they have? Right? They tried banking. They don't have the heft to be a Singapore or a Switzerland or to stand up in that industry. So they're doing this. I'd rather be a citizen of a country where more revenue comes from, hey, let's have a voluntary exchange of, we need people who are of good character and who have money and who can contribute. And most of those folks they know aren't going to move to their country. They're just going to use the passport to travel. They may not even do that. They may just keep the passport in a drawer for when it's needed. But you know what? There was talk during the pandemic, some of those countries are more open than a lot of the countries around the world. What if a lot of these people came to their second citizenship country? It is something that you always have available to you. And I'd rather have, whether it's in a time of economic crisis, whether it's in a time of high taxes, whether it's in a time of a pandemic or some kind of black swan event, I'll go to the country where their bread is buttered by voluntary transactions with folks of good character. For the most part, one or two exceptions that you'll find, they always point those out, but tens of thousands of people, people like myself, no criminal record, clean, just want to do the right thing, just want to be left alone. That's where their money comes from. And so rather than relying too much on taxes, they found a way to fund their country. Now, that's not going to work for every country. A country with 100 million people isn't really going to move the needle that much with citizenship. That said, Turkey and Egypt have both tried, and they're bringing in investments for their programs. Those are different beasts. Maybe that's a third or fourth passport for you, those countries with some heft. But if you have a big country's passport, I think you want one of these places where money comes in, we spend it on the people, and we have to be responsive to the people. Because right now, you're living in a country, no one's responsive to anybody. Do you think, what was it, Ronald Reagan? They had the joke about Gorbachev that people said in the U.S. you can walk into the White House and pound on the president's desk and tell him, President Reagan, I don't like how you're running this country. Do you really think you have any say in that? Do you think you even have any say with your members of Congress or members of Parliament? You probably don't. And so there's a difference. Have a passport from a country with heft and have a passport from a country where they just want, again, from necessity, to do deals with people in a peaceful way, be left alone. If you have any libertarian instincts, or if you just want to be left alone, or if you just want to make sure no one's going to raise your taxes, that's the kind of country that you want to be a citizen of. They've been screwed over by the big major powers, and so they know how that goes. And yet, they still have these ambitions to, we have to save our country. We can't just sit here waiting for everything to fall apart. And so what the article also talks about is how Western countries don't like that. Why? Because your legacy brand country is not about a voluntary exchange of, hey, can you pay something and we're going to make sure you get some services and we're going to make sure everyone's taken care of. That's not what it's about. They are empires in many cases, and you are one of the cogs in the wheel of an empire. And for me, ultimately, that was one of the reasons why I just decided I don't want to be a citizen of the U.S. empire. I don't need to have the American brand on me to feel like I'm a somebody. In fact, I do know a few people who've gone down to their Caribbean citizenship country and started businesses, or they brought Bitcoin, or they did any number of things. And, they felt good that they could actually make an impact on the economy. There's something to be said that you donate money to a country and it actually goes to do something other than to fund the latest war or to pay this year's $1 trillion in interest on the debt. And I think it's a change in philosophy. I think people who are frustrated with the direction that their legacy brand countries are going need to make a substantial change. If you qualify for citizenship by descent, let's say you're American, and you can also be a citizen of the UK because your parents are from there, or Ireland because your grandparents are from there. I think they're a bit more responsive probably than a number of the European countries, or Germany or Poland, wherever you could get citizenship by descent. Fine, get that. It's another good passport. Maybe they're better than the US. Maybe they're better than Canada. At the very least, it offers you different levers. You can move up and down. But you haven't really moved the needle that much by being both American and German, or as they open up dual citizenship there, or American and Irish. Have it, be proud of it, that's great. But as we're seeing, sanctions, was talking to folks at Nomad Capitalist Live, sanctions, they feel, in countries like the US, increasingly backfiring. The world is more competitive than ever. The U.S. doesn't get to call the shots anymore. The U.S. and their allies, the legacy brand countries, do not get to entirely call the shots anymore. And what happens as they do that? What happens as the U.S. dollar share of the world reserve currency goes down? Less and less and less influence. And we've talked about for years, does the West and the legacy brand countries meet that loss of influence by just saying, well, that's great, time to pass the torch, or do they get nastier? We've seen what they do with citizenship by investment. Hey, we're going to bother you unless you add interviews for citizenship by investment. It doesn't matter that you do robust due diligence, and they catch people who haven't even been convicted of crimes. They can catch that you're being investigated. They can catch that you have a current problem. We don't really see that because we do our own checks on people, but you can see that. But no, the West says you got to do interviews. They want to add as many roadblocks as possible. Now, I've told you, get your citizenship by investment, get your second citizenships in general as early as you can, because it's only going to get harder. And that's one of the reasons why it's going to get harder. On top of the fact that more people around the world just want this stuff. There's greater demand from countries all around the world in this time of chaos. But why is the Western world pushing back? Exactly because this isn't the system they want to operate in. They want countries part of the empire. And listen, Nigel Farage has always been a gentleman to us at Nomad Capitalist Live. I'm not going to say anything bad about him in that regard, but we do disagree. I've always said we disagree on a number of issues. One thing we disagree on is those so-called values of the West. I think a lot of other countries that he wants to have on board, they see it differently, and they're going their own way. And I think some of them that are maligned in the Western media are going out and saying, hey, let's just have a nice voluntary transaction. We'll give you something of value. You give us something of value. We both win. Win-win. I don't think the U.S. wants you as their citizen to win. They're happy to have you have that illusion. They're happy to collect your tax dollars when you are winning. But are they saving you? No, because things are getting worse. People are more anxious than ever. Things are going in the wrong direction. And that's exactly why you want to have a citizenship in one of these countries. The fact that they don't really want you to have it, that they want to make it more difficult, that they want to put articles in the newspaper saying, oh, did you see this one guy who 5 years after he got the citizenship was convicted of a crime? How would Dominica know that a guy would get convicted of a crime that he would commit after he got the citizenship? One guy out of, 10,000. Oh, look at this, the Guardian says. Yeah, look at this. It's terrible. Yeah, most of it's people like you and me, who just want to be left the hell alone. And the fact that those countries operate in that way, the fact that they're not going to follow you around the world to tax you because they don't want to and they can't, and it's much more run like a business than a country, is exactly why you want a citizenship like that. Not to say anything bad about the bigger country citizenship programs, not to say anything bad about, again, European Union citizenship by descent. But this should be part of your portfolio. And the fact that if you're going to keep your current passport, you want that. You want a small country. You probably want a kind of a different country, like a BRICS kind of country. And maybe you want an outlier or another citizenship by descent. You might want to have 3 or 4 passports, and each one is a lever. Stuff happens, you move one lever up, move one lever down. Move it up, move it down. That's how you protect yourself. But this is something that's different than what you're used to, and that's why I think it's powerful.
This is Oman, and today we're showing you luxury living in its beautiful capital city of Muscat. Now we're going to show you one of the sexiest luxury villas here in Oman.
We're going to show you how to live like a king